everyone. Welcome back to the Evermore podcast, the Newcastle United podcast on the Evermore YouTube channel. I'm your host, Chris, and I'm joined by Mark, thankfully, who's not dressed like my twin brother tonight, and by two lads who always deliver, unlike Newcastle United wingers. I've got the Welsh wizard, Di, and I've also got Pep Guardiola back for more. Odie, how you doing, boys?
Yeah, not bad, mate. Not bad. Cheers.
Good, mate. Good.
Great to see. Great to see. Well, Di's going to soldier on. Bless him. He's got his sticky shoes, cold voice on. He pre-warned us before he come on tonight. So if there's any love hearts in the comments, Di, we'll be sure to pull him up with that sultry tone of your voice there, mate. I might do some dangerous things tonight. I'll tell you. We'll see what we got. It is a bit of a moany podcast, so maybe we do need a bit of that Barry White tone going on. But we're gonna get stuck in a minute. Just before we do a little bit of housekeeping, if you haven't already, please click the like and subscribe button. We'd love you to come on board. I think we're at about 1,830 something 4 subscribers or something, which is amazing. The podcast's only really been going since I think December last year, Mark, wasn't it? So we've had a massive journey so far. You know, loads of love from you guys. We really appreciate it. It's all free content. We don't charge anybody. It's difficult times. We don't want to do that. We just love talking about the tune, good, bad, or ugly. That's what we do. So come and join us. Hit the notification bell, and you won't miss anything from the shows Mondays and Wednesdays, and pop-up videos too. So let's get stuck straight in then. So more points dropped at the weekend, a bit disappointing. Di, I'm going to come to you first. We were all confident, some might say cocky, that we were going to absolutely hump Bournemouth without any sweat broken, but it didn't turn out to be the case, mate, did it?
No, it was a bit of a weird game, really. I thought we had a lot of ball in areas of the pitch that fundamentally didn't really make much of a difference. I didn't think we carried any sort of kind of real threat, and I'm sure we'll go kind of more in depth into the game later. But the inverted wingers really frustrated me on the weekend. We played football like we were trying to get the ball wide, and then what are we going to do with it when we get there? We're going to put it back into the middle of the pitch again, and then go to the other side. And no one wants to cross because everyone's on their wrong foot, and it just became very, very frustrating to watch. With all that said, you know, we did have chances. I think that's the thing. We did also have, you know, not loads, but we had 1 or 2 chances where could have won the game. So it's a frustrating time, and I do think there's stuff that fundamentally didn't work out on the day. But I also think that sometimes you can just have one of those days. And I know there are players that frustrate and decisions a manager makes which we're not always happy with, but you can have those days. So I'm not going to get too hysterical just yet, but I will admit to being very, very frustrated on the weekend.
Yeah, coming to you on it, Odie, as well. Where do you think really that the game was lost in itself? I know you were quite disappointed with the shift Bruno put in, but he didn't look fit, did he, mate? He looked like he was rusty as anything, didn't he?
No, I think first 25, 30 minutes. In fact, actually, the last 5 minutes of the first half, when we looked to get on top, he played a couple of passes in the box, which one to Isak, which he sent over to the back post with Joe Linton, which got a really good save from the goalkeeper. Probably was the best cross we saw of the game, actually, and it came from a centre forward. And my biggest frustration was that we were constantly going sideways. I don't want to be too hard on like some of the midfield, but the Joe Linton, Willock, Longstaff midfield, which we ended the game with, like that's a Steve Bruce midfield. Like I don't want to be too harsh on the lads, but like that's where Joe Linton has massively turned around what we thought of him, say 12, 14 months ago. But he's not going to be the dynamic midfielder who's going to open the door or like take a little step and things like that. And the two players who could do that, as we've kind of alluded to already, are inverted wingers. Didn't really seem to create very much. There's one time in the first half, Fraser got down the left and sent down one cross in with his left foot and seemed quite irritated that Isak didn't try and get in front of the goalkeeper to get his head in it. But my biggest fear is that without Maximin doing something unpredictable, and he wasn't fit, so he can't do something unpredictable, without him doing something unpredictable, we didn't look like unlocking the door. And my bigger concern is that's the same as it was against Forest till Shea put in an absolute thunderbolt. It's the same as it was against Palace until it hit Tyreek Mitchell's head and went in and the ref decided to disallow it. So, bar the City game, that's 3 of 4 home games where we've either needed a worldie, an own goal, or a VAR intervention to score a goal. And that's a bit of a concern. And I don't want to downplay this too much, but Forest, Bournemouth and Palace are teams, if you want to finish the top off the table, you need to be beaten at home, and we didn't beat them.
I couldn't agree with you more, Mark. Just bringing you in on this one as well. I think Odie makes a lot of sense there, mate. You know, these are games, these are fixtures that Newcastle United really should have earmarked as probably 9 points. The teams he's just rattled off there. If we want to improve on last season, we've got aspirations to push, for the top 10 even, let alone top 8, 7. You've got to be putting teams like that away at home. We had loads of chances to do so. And I mean, I think Stevie Wonder can see Miggy Almiron hasn't got a right foot. So I don't understand why Eddie Howe can't see that, mate. It's really frustrating, isn't it, as a fan watching on?
It is. I mean, look at it. I text you every game, don't I? God, the most frustrating thing in the world, and I had to rephrase that and say the world of football is the fact that Miggy won't use his right foot. It is just it's unbearable at times. It's frustrating, yes. 20 shots means that you're getting into positions to create chances. However, of those 20 shots, your XG against Bournemouth was 1.55, which means you're not creating good chances. Creating chances isn't the same thing. So they're not getting in. Yes, it does look like in previous games they were making better chances. You look at the Willock one against Palace, the Willock one against Wolves in particular. I'm not just picking on Joe Willock, but Bournemouth was just, there was something off about that game. I think it's probably not to not get too carried away. A poor result against a promoted side. It happens. It was 71% possession, but you're going to struggle to create things. But I agree, when you come down to playing players like Miggy on that side, where you know full well you're going to channel him down the right and he's going to cut back, and it prevents the opportunity to put a ball in the box every single time. It is telegraphed. The easiest switch to make would have been just swap them across the other side and start putting a couple of balls into the box and create something different, because it was crying out for just a little bit of a change. But let's not forget that we're a world away from the first 7 games of last season. And I know we're going to come on to that in a bit, so I'm not going to jump into that just now. But it's 1 defeat in 7. It's only 1 win in 7, but it's 1 defeat in 7. So it's not the end of the world. I'm going to be a positive one today. It was a poor result. You earmark those games, like you said. You want to take 3 points from them, but it is just the start. You're only 7 games in. There's another 31 to go, and you still only lost 1 game in, well, let's say, odd circumstances against Liverpool. Other than that, don't look like getting beaten, and that's something to build from.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yes,
but I just want to add something there. I think the other good thing that the point you make as well is that last season, at the end of last season, we were getting some good wins, some good results. Often we were having 1 or 2 chances in a game and taking them. And I think it's silly of us to be saying, last year we were class and we're shit now. Like, it doesn't work like that. And I think the reality of the situation is, if Joe Linton scores his chance, which he absolutely should, we probably go and win that game 2 or 3-0. So nothing I don't think has particularly changed from last year. We're just being that little bit less clinical. I don't know what our XG was last season in that run, but I'd imagine it probably wasn't massively different from what it is now. And I think the other thing is, all of this is phases, right? We've gone from last year sort of being on the back foot, trying to hit teams on the break, being clinical when we can. This year, Eddie Howe's had a full summer to do what he wants. We're now on the front foot, playing a very different brand of football. And when we play teams who give us a bit of space, Liverpool, Man City, they give us that little bit of space. We played a certain way, and that was actually probably our best performances of the year because we were allowed to play the way we wanted to. The next building block is now we're going to play teams like Bournemouth and Palace who are going to sit in, not give us a sniff. So the next step on that ladder, if you like, is added a plan B to our game. So I also think that all of this stuff can't happen overnight. You can't implement a new passing and moving front foot pressing policy whilst trying to set up a plan B as well. All of this stuff takes time. The bench isn't good enough. That takes time. There's players who are not having a good game. That takes time. So all of this stuff, I know everyone wants it to happen now, and I get that, and so do I. And it was, I was annoyed on Saturday, but I also think that we've got to remember from time to time that we're on, I hate to use the expression, but we're on a bit of a journey, and sometimes they're going to be cock-ups, and sometimes you're going to take a step back. And as part of that journey, no one goes from the start to the finish straight away. There's going to be some things you have to go through to get to that point. So, it's not perfect, but like Mark said, we've won 1 game. Sorry, Ash. Apologies, mate. Apologies. Sack him. How out. Get how out. I'm disgusted.
Just
Talk about some bacon or something. 5 minutes.
Di, you touched on the XG there. I've just had a quick look. The last 12 games of last season, the XG per game across that period was 1.26. For the first 7 games of this season, it's 1.64. So
not massively.
The chances. So it's not huge. It's significant though. I mean, it's 0.4 roughly per game that you're ahead of that curve. So the clinicalness is the issue this season, and it's just, I think that's just key. Those chances will get put away at some point. They'll start to come and things will click. I just think it's a bad game. It's been a tricky start, I think, where you're betting in possibly a little bit more of a positive system, and you've got new players that have come in. Yes, there's not a huge amount of them, but it does take a little bit of time. But the signs are there for the positive in the future. And one result against Bournemouth, and it happens. You know, there are other teams that would have lost that game. So it's just, let's take the positive from it. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, I don't know what you've been smoking tonight, Mark. You are with Lucy in the sky with diamonds at times.
This is just water, by the way.
I'm gonna bring it back down to earth a little bit, right? I'm not going to be negative. I'm going to be pragmatic here and just try and dissect a few things. I think Di touched on it, and Ori touched on it as well. You know, the bench was dreadful, right? Let's not make any mistake about that. If that bench is under Steve Bruce, we're getting told we're shite, we're awful, we're going down, everything else, right? These players in the squad, I know you can't just replace everybody like Forest did, right? They had their reasons for that. Half the squad was on loan, right? But, you know, we definitely strengthened in the window defensively. There's no doubt about that. And the defensive recruits were fantastic. You know, you go back to Trippier, you know, Target, Byrne, bringing in Botman this window, bringing in Nick Pope. Absolutely superb. That's why we look like we're not going to get beat, because we've got a really solid defense. The midfield, bar Bruno, isn't good enough. Joe Linton is reinvented and all that, right? But Joe Linton needs to get on the front foot in games like that, not track back and try and be that defensive disruptor. When we haven't got the ball, he has to press on. Yes, he should have scored and he had a rush of blood to the head and everything. Joe Willock looks knackered. Me and Mark did a special on this. I think Joe Willock has had the best part of his game coached out of him, which is his finishing, his natural finishing ability. And I'm not saying that as a way to criticize Eddie Howe, because I know that's illegal and I'll go to jail for 20 years for doing that. But, you know, this is a kid who was an instinctive goal-scoring midfielder. And I get Eddie Howe's looked at him and thought, hey, do you know what? He can be more than that, right? But don't make him less than that. He's become less than that now. So when you look at that 3-man midfield, in a game like that, the old Joe Willock, yes, he might not have tracked back and made 65 tackles or whatever, but he might have smashed the ball in the bottom corner and won 1-0. You know what I mean? That's the Joe Willock that we're missing in a game like that. So there is elements here for me where, you know, Eddie Howe has to be, I think, just to get your opinion, Audie, because I know you mentioned this before, come on. Eddie Howe's got to have a little bit of criticism here, because, you know, the midfield and the attack bar Isak, which, let's be honest, they bought because they thought Wilson was knackered for a long period of time again. The midfield and the attack isn't much better than what it was last season, mate. We're still relying on Maxi and Wilson, who are always injured.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll go back to the Palace game. Isak gets in, and if he lifts that over the keeper, or if he slots it under the keeper and we go 1-0 up, we probably win that game as well. And you know, I'm a massive fan of Isak. I'm not going to hide that. I think he's a brilliant player. And I thought on Saturday we saw possibly the worst situation we could see, which is where we try and play Chris Wood football with a dynamic centre forward up front. And also we play it with two players who I've just mentioned there before can't cross the ball with the foot where they beat the man. So it must have been the easiest. That Bournemouth left back must have had the easiest game of his life, Martin Almiron, because he knows he's got to come back inside every single time to put the cross in. What I would say, which I hadn't seen from us before, is Trippier then took that on upon himself to go, right, I'll go beyond.
Yeah,
and that's what
and
the penalty actually comes to, share lifting the ball into the box. Yeah. And that if the width's going to come that way, then fine, I don't have a problem with that. I didn't see Target get in to the same extent beyond Fraser, but I don't know if that's because he doesn't feel the confidence that people would cover back in for him, whereas Trippier's probably got the ability or the kudos in the squad to be able to go in that. However, having said that, I'm really worried that we didn't have an additional plan, say on 70 minutes when we just got it back to 1-1, that we didn't have a plan to go, right, we'll go 2 up top now, we'll try and give them something different and we'll try and change it. And instead we went, right, well, we'll just keep doing what we were doing and we'll take Bruno off and we'll stick Longstaff on and we'll take Fraser off, we'll stick Murphy on. And for that, I'm not saying Howe deserves like unfounded criticism. I think there has to be criticism that so far, when we've played those teams, we haven't really looked like we had a game plan that, right, if we don't score now, we're going to change it and we're going to do this. Because against Palace, we clearly didn't. We just kept trying to do the same thing and the same thing and the same thing and ended up with a draw. And against Bournemouth, up until the 89th or 88th and a half minute, we didn't change anything about the system to try and get something different. I think that needs to be looked at because better teams play against us, so we've got more options. Teams who think they might get beaten by us sit in, they'll accept a point away from home, and we have to be good enough to break them down.
Yeah, Di, just to get your take on this question here, it's a good question there by two coin a phrase. If we were to play Bournemouth again, with the same team, would we do exactly the same thing? And he's saying he'd like to hope that we had a plan B. But I mean, I think looking at that bench again, going back to that bench, it is quite alarming to me. I'm not being, hyperbolic or anything like that. I still believe in Eddie Howe. I think he's a great manager. And I think he's the man for, to get us to where we want to be. But you look at that bench, I'm sure he's been let down by transfers, stolen at the last minute and everything. But we were devastated that a 19-year-old boy, which we'll come on to later on, wasn't on the bench because he was the only person out of that collection of players who possibly could have sparked some life on the pitch. That's a bit concerning, Di, is it not? We haven't got anybody else other than that.
I mean, it's yes and no. Like, to answer the question there, if we played the same team again and try, yeah, I do think we would do the same thing because Eddie Howe's philosophy is to play a certain way, and he wants to show a dedication and commitment to that. Last season, I think it was Leicester beat us 4-0 or something like that, and that's because rather than go into that game and try and be a bit more pragmatic, he thought, no, my system is this. I'm impressing the system on the team. I believe in the system. Therefore, all right, we're going to get beat 4-0. Next week, we'll do it better, and we'll do it better, and we'll do it better. So I don't think you would change. And if I'm honest, I think you would be right not to change as well, because if this is what he wants us to do, the plan needs to be to get better at plan A as much as it is to work on a plan B. And the only way you're going to do that is by doing it more against teams who frustrate and break you, who you find hard to break you down. Do I think there should be a better plan B? Of course. Bringing Chris Wood on with 2 minutes of normal time to go, and then after spending 80 minutes trying to get the ball into the box, then stopping crossing the ball in the box, I thought it was fucking stupid. But, would that bit of the game be exactly the same? I would like to think not. So I do think there is a plan B, but I think we've got to commit to plan A before we worry about B. In terms of the bench, I had this bit of back and forth with on the weekend, Chris. I just don't know what anyone, Eddie Howe or otherwise, is supposed to do about that bench.
No,
we can't go and spend big money to replace people and get people in for two reasons. One, FFP's a shambles, and two, no one wants to spend. The way to do it is get 10 million, let's say, for Murphy, spend 20 million on a replacement, so there's a bit more FFP balance. No one's going to pay 10 million for him. You wouldn't pay £10 for him. The boy's absolute toilet. We've got Richie on the bench and all these other people that they're not going to do anything. So that's not his fault. That's just the way the situation is. I agree with you about Anderson. I'm assuming he took a knock. Or some, which is why he wasn't in the squad. So again, I just don't know what Howe's supposed to do. Unfortunately, through the course of a season, you're going to get knocks to your better players, and it's just unfortunate for us that in the last month or so, Bruno, ASM, and now Wilson have all been crocked together. Well, Bruno came back certainly not match fit, but I'd rather have him there than not. So I just don't know what else Howe is supposed to do, if I'm honest. Shouldn't be absolved of criticism in any way, because that's not what I'm saying. Because I do think there were things that could have been changed in game, but there's also some stuff that he just can't control or manage. And I think we've also got to be a bit realistic with our expectations. People were talking about top 6 at the start of this season. In fact, it's not that. I'm drinking tonight as we go through. That's
he's
what
drinking. He's full of cold medicine and drink. That's why he's on.
Do you know what? That's exactly what it is. I've got a bit of beer and shitload of paracetamol in me. I'm away. I'll shut up now.
No, I love it, mate. Don't you worry about that. Absolutely love it. But no, we're going to come on to a section actually about how how Eddie Howe might be able to sort this problem out. Some real strong opinions on this one, mate. So the next section is the boos that were very audible in the stadium. And the line of this time last year, which I wouldn't say I've got a problem with, but I'm just fucking sick of hearing it, to be honest with you. But starting with the boos, Audie, you were quite critical of fans booing. You were in the ground yourself, weren't you, mate? And did you think that was just a bit ridiculous? And some of the crap that's come on Twitter after that, mate?
I think ridiculous is probably being a bit polite about it, Chris. If I'm being really honest, anyone who went to that game and thought Newcastle United players weren't trying to win that game of football, I genuinely don't know what you were watching. I'm not. I am being. I think. I'm not being quite as sensible as Di and sticking to the Richard line of things will get better, etc., etc. But I'm more on the lines of, do you know what? If we're getting upset about not beating teams at home, that's fine. Like, I can deal with us being upset that we're not beating teams at home. I don't think there's a single player you could look at from that performance, or Eddie Howe, or Tyndall, or the ownership, or anybody in the club who genuinely thought, we'll take out each. Like, I don't think anybody thought that. They were all, even to the last minute, doing their best to try and win. So to boo the players when they put... And all right, it's frustrating. We haven't beaten Bournemouth. We haven't beaten Palace. Yeah, we didn't beat Man City. I didn't see people booing us off when we drew 3-3 with Man City. You know, there has to be a sense of realism. We've only been beaten once at home, I think, under Howe still, and that was by Liverpool 1-0 since that Man City game, sorry. We've only been beaten once at home under Howe in the league. And I've got a massive issue with us booing people off, because where do you draw the line at that then? What comes next? If we only win 2-0, are we going to boo people off because we're not winning 5-0? And a lot of it, and I don't want to say this, because a lot of it seems to come from like the entitlement whinge factor. Is it because I've rocked up here and I demand to be entertained? Well, Bournemouth are actually quite good at frustrating us.
Yeah,
like,
I've paid for this product. Yeah, give me something, entertain me type of thing. Like almost like Gladiator. Are you not entertained? Type scenario. But yeah. Sorry, go on, Ollie. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, like, what's the encore got to be? You know, like, do we want to go like penalty shootouts every single week so that we get a winner and that we can feel like we've got something there? Like, of course we don't want that. The job is to score more goals than the opposition. Let's be honest. Had the referee not been told to go to the Vermont and have a look, we'd have got beat 1-0. Like, and I still wouldn't have booed them off because they were still trying to get a result. It's just, unfortunately, sometimes you're going to have off days where you're just not good enough. And expectations have been raised, probably for some people a little bit too high. We were never going to finish in the top 6 this season. Like, I don't know who thought we were, but it was never going to happen. So if we finish 8th or 9th, 10th, I'll be all right with that. Like, I'll be okay. So
that's an 8th. That's an 8th. You stop pointing and get me in the shit.
Quite the wrong way to start with.
I was going to say who's over there, but you do make a good point, Audie. I think, do you know what? Just getting your take on this, Mark, as well. I think we spoke about this, didn't we? I almost think that Eddie Howe, for such a good job that he did, almost set a bit of a false pretense in a lot of the fans' minds that we were just going to be epically amazing the next season, you know, and because when he came in, we were so shit, and he got us playing well, and he got us, you know, battling in games. He made average players look good. He made good players look brilliant. And then we all just thought it was going to consistently go. And it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's faltered, it's just stalled a little bit. We're still much better than we were last year. We'll get back to that line in a minute and how you use it and how you should use it. But, you know, I think that some of the fans, Mark, getting you in here is they maybe have an inflated sense of how good these players are, you know, and I think Di touched on that as well. And you can't get a tune out of a knackered guitar, no matter how good your fingers are, really, at times, can't you, with Eddie Howe? You know, so do you think it's a bit of a reality check, Mark, for these guys?
I think it's sensible, has to come back into this, doesn't it? And yes, I think there is that entitlement thing. Well, we've turned up, we've seen how we've got results last season. We want exactly the same now. It doesn't work like that. Every team's evolved over the summer. You've got new teams that have come to the league that you've not seen before. Despite the fact that, you know, you've got three people at the club that were actually at Bournemouth, that they're a different proposition. And what one of the comments said, they will come and park the bus, and it becomes really difficult to break these teams down. So that's a learning curve in itself about being able to move the ball quicker, and especially moving the ball quicker amongst players who perhaps aren't capable of doing that. You know, this isn't Liverpool. This isn't Manchester City yet. This is still the start of this project, isn't it? So yeah, the players are a certain level. There are one or two that are way above that level. And I think it's just, there has to be some reasonable expectations. And I think we're guilty of it as well, because I think we all kind of thought, well, if they perform like they've started or like they can, yes, top 8 is probably realistic. but there's a level to some of those players that isn't the top half of the Premier League yet, and those players will need to move on. So if you can stay there or thereabouts, then they're still doing a good job. They're still in the right position. They're in the is it 10th at the moment? Still with only one defeat. They've made themselves tough to beat first and foremost, which is key. You got the start of last season, it was 4 defeats in 7. So I mean, I don't get it. I don't get why you would boo you. If you'd lost every game, fair enough. I can understand that. But you've only lost one game, and that was against Liverpool in ridiculous circumstances.
And we shouldn't have done. We shouldn't have done, as you rightly say, Mark.
What's the problem? And like Audie said, I mean, Christ, we'll get into the American system if you're going to end up every game with a win or a defeat. Christ, we'll have like 16 periods of overtime, and
we're going to have cheerleaders and Bruno and Joe Linton are going to come down on zip wires with like fireworks hanging out the side of their head if Todd Boehly's getting anything to do with it, mate.
The boo boys are ridiculous. I mean, I've got absolutely no time for it because it is just ridiculous. Like I said, I can understand if you start the season, you haven't won a game, you're playing shit, nothing's going right. You've got managers making stupid mistakes and stupid substitutions, but that's not happening. No. So shut up and watch the football. just
hang on a minute. Have you got a cold as well? You're never this angry, mate. What's going on tonight? Everyone's lost the plot. But I know, do you want to come in on this comment's probably a good one for you to come on and make your point as well. So to coin a phrase saying you thought the crowd didn't do its part, very flat, crazy that people have booed. People should put more effort in supporting the team. You've got a bit of a question as the Saturday 3 o'clock atmosphere, Audie. Is it starting to damper a little bit? Are people not in the right mindset for it anymore than they used to be?
I don't know whether it's necessarily the right mindset, but I think when games have been on the telly and they've been built up to be important, last season, the second half of last season, every home game felt like an event. So Arsenal at home, I remember saying to people, I cannot even begin to think of like when last we had an atmosphere like that for an end of season game. Maybe under Rafa, when we're singing at him, when we're beating Spurs 5-1, we want you to stay, when we've been relegated, but it still wasn't as good as that beating Arsenal. And I just feel like the City game was back up to that sort of level, but we've had 3 Saturday 3 o'clocks. Now, I wasn't at Forest, so I can't comment on that. But the other 2, Palace, the atmosphere's gone flat really quickly.
Yeah,
hasn't it? The Bournemouth one, from the point at which they scored until we got the penalty, there was a couple of rows have come on, but you could hear the odd person singing by themselves, which last season you never heard. Like the crowd were keeping going. So I don't know, but I'm starting to wonder, is it something to do with Saturday 3 o'clock? Are we in a situation where, for whatever reason, it's not on the telly, maybe it's not as exciting a fixture as people want? Is the atmosphere not getting back up for those games?
Maybe Ash has got a good point there as well, that the fact that we didn't have war flags in attendance doing what they do, I mean, their work can't really be underestimated, can it? I think ever since they came in, died to bring you in on this one, mate, the atmosphere that they create with with that whole presentation and just the buzz going into the ground and seeing the flags and everybody singing in unison and chanting, that's a massive shot of adrenaline in the arm for the supporters and the players, isn't it? Taking that away, and I know the event and I know the reason they didn't do it, but I think Ash has a good point there, mate, doesn't he? Taking that away, potentially we started on a bum note rather than started up here that we normally do. I
don't know. Is it that, are we that reliant on it? To me,
shouldn't be. I think having experienced it, it is unbelievable compared to what it used to be, as Audie says, the flatness, the doubts, the worries. I think war flags almost eradicate all of that, and you think, fucking come on, we're going to fucking do these a day. And for the first half an hour, that buzz is up there. And without having them doing that on Saturday, it was almost like, well, do you know what? We haven't won in X amount of games. Yeah. And people started to doubt, I think, from the start, mate. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I get it. I do. I just think, in my opinion, and I mainly go to away games because of where I live, so I can't comment too much. But I do think these things happen when things start getting better, right? Especially in a big for a big club or in a big town or a big city. You probably have of the 52,000, take the away fans out, call it 50,000 every week who go, you probably have about 40,000, I reckon, who are in one way, shape or form diehards. Maybe not everyone's a season ticket holder, but people who go regularly, home and away, people who know the drill and don't boo. And then it's almost potluck on the other 10,000 who turns up. Is this someone's first game ever? Yeah. Is it someone's first game, with their pals? Is everyone, a couple of young lads gone out and got pissed and think it's funny to boo and everyone's bundled in? You just don't know. So I do think that's the case. My example, like the team I support here, ADO Den Haag, are absolute shit. And it's a great laugh to go, but there is the stadium holds about 10,000 and there's about 4,000 to go every week. And the 4,000 of us who go every week, I got a season ticket. It is brilliant fun. Everyone sings and dances and shouts and swears and has a great time. When we got to the playoff final last year, the World and his wife came, and the atmosphere in the playoff final was absolutely awful because it's a load of people who've never been there before. We were 3-0 up, eventually lost on penalties. The atmosphere at the end was just toxic, and that is because there's a load of idiots who don't normally go turning up. And I do think it maybe is a similar scenario here, because I just think booing, I think booing at a football match anyway is absolutely idiotic. And I also think that if you're going to boo a team who've lost once all season, you need your head read. I just think it's thick is the word I'm going to use. It's just stupid. So for me, I think people need to give their heads a wobble a bit.
Yeah, but Mark, just getting your take on this before we move on as well. I think that Di might have a good point there as well, that because we've become a kind of bigger club in terms of the commercial, elements and hitting the news and everybody going, oh, look at these guys, they're buying these players, they're moving in the right direction. You might attract a certain sense of the prawn sandwich brigade that Roy Keane famously said years ago, and there might not be the passionate, chest thumping fans that that Audie's alluded to in the past, that they get the players up. I noticed it was very noticeable when Isak scored. He was going, "Come on, get up," because he wasn't. He probably couldn't believe how flat it was. But also just an observation as well from my side. I think it's both ways. I was in the Leazes end with PK for the City game, which was incredible. And there was loads of young lads around us. And I'm not saying this is a boring old fart, because that's what I am now. But they seemed more interested in turning around and doing this to the away fans and giving them shit than actually cheering the lads on. So when you put fans like that into a game like that, where it's a bit flat, a bit disappointing, a bit crap, they're going to vent that aggression on probably our own players, let alone the away fans, aren't they? Because we're not on top, So it might be a cocktail of both things, maybe.
A little bit. I think the difficulty, we kind of said what you don't want coming in is the football tourism. Although that brings money into the ground, it sort of ruins the atmosphere, doesn't it? You see that at Old Trafford. There's so many football tourists that aren't genuine match goers, that aren't there every week. They're not there to create an atmosphere. They're there as a one-off, and they don't get involved. That's always difficult. I think that's the nature of the beast, though, is as the club gets bigger, you're going to attract more of that. I don't think that's there yet. It's not the sort of the makeup of the crowd hasn't changed. I don't think massively. I just think it's one of those. I just think it was, yes, the victim of the 3 o'clock thing. I sort of agree with Audie in that regard. I think the 3 o'clock it's become an odd. It's almost an odd time to have a game now.
Because they get changed so much. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, exactly. Yeah. And then I think there was yes, War Flags wasn't there, and yes, they shouldn't rely on them. But I think you become accustomed to what's going on there. And also from the opposition side, they come out and realise that atmosphere hasn't started straight away. We saw what it's done to teams already when they come out, and you can see them go
rattled on there. You can see them rattled.
Yeah.
Arsenal's a great example. They were totally rattled when that hit them. So
for Bournemouth to come out and go, actually, there's nothing going on.
It's quiet.
We can, if we can keep it quiet, and they did. We can. We can come away with something, and that gives them a little bit more of an impetus to put more into the game. So it is a strange one. I genuinely just think it was for that game in particular. It's just a mix of everything going on. We've had the game called off previously. A little bit of lack of game. So you've got Bruno coming back into the side. So you're still missing a couple through injury. Potentially one or two others that might have been playing slightly undercooked, and then the atmosphere to add with what was going on with obviously the Queen and everything, then I think everything sort of takes its toll, and it ends up being a bad day, and it sort of then reflects on everything else, because you start to look for patterns, don't you, where things have had to try and change things that don't need to be changed, and we'll see war flags back, and we'll get the atmosphere back in the ground, and you begin to you start to rely on that again, but those things will come, and I think you get a better performance, and everything sort of this conversation disappears, doesn't it?
I'll tell you one thing that was amazing. I don't know where Eddie Howe hid that phone booth that he changed into that suit into his jogging gear for. It was like Superman, wasn't it? I was waiting for him to fly up and try to touch the top of the Gallagher end at one point. It was incredibly impressive. But just to close off on this one, it is a little bit of history repeating itself. Order, you just banged in the chat there, mate. It's a great shout. The same thing happened under Bobby Robson, didn't it? And it's almost Bobby and Eddie Howe have walked very similar paths. Bobby took over a team that was flat and devoid of confidence, at the wrong end of the table, after a pretty shit manager. He obviously had a lot of things to mend, a lot of things to do. He brought in some young players, some experienced players. He blended it. We started playing really well. And then the minute almost that massive upward climb just petered out a bit, the boos came back, didn't they, back then, mate? So it's almost like history repeating itself.
It is, and one of the commenters put it before. I think something like, so much first, only demanding a team that tries. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If we can't pretend to be, we're not all about winning. We're not all about winning. We're not all about winning.
Change like
and then
that,
when we don't win, you suddenly go, we are all about winning. Like,
yeah.
Obviously, everybody wants us to win. Like, nobody's saying, I want us to draw 38 games a season. That's not. But the reality is that you're not going to win every single game this season. Yeah. I mean, we've already seen that we've lost one. Yeah, it was in unlucky circumstances, but if we'd held on then, would we not have booed against Bournemouth? Some people would have still booed against Bournemouth. I think, someone asked me after the game on Saturday, do you think Howe's under any pressure? And PK asked me the same question, actually. Like, is Howe under any pressure? And I said no. But by the way those fans reacted in the ground, were we not to beat Fulham and then go in that Brentford game and not beat Brentford? Yeah. Well, if that was how many booed after Bournemouth, how many people would boo at that point? And that would be my bit of a concern.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be a big test of the mettle of the owners, I think. But just finish on this one before we move on then. So just to cover this time last year line that I've seen thrown in people's faces on Twitter, I kind of understand the comparison. I think people are using it in the right way and the wrong way. It's like anything, with a statement like that. Every supporter really knows that we were dreadful last season and the world was ending. Steve Bruce was, in charge, the Baron of Bacon, taking us to the championship, on a flaming cart of hell. Mike Ashley was still there. We were all, suicidal, absolutely hated and everything else. So we all know we're in a much better position, but football's a fickle game. We all know that. We're all football fans, and we've just been talking about it there. People make statements in the kind of microcosm of the moment and they go, hey, we're class now. We should be beating these 4-5-0. This is shite. Boo. And it's the common sense part of the brain doesn't kick in. As always just articulated really well, as you did that as well, and Mark. Just, you need to almost have a reality check. And I think Big Dan Byrne summed it up quite well. He said, we've always been like that, going back to the Robson years, as you just said, Audie. We've always had that bit to us as a fan base. Ownership be damned, So maybe everyone just needs to pump the brakes a little bit and figure out, just a place to be content with the progress, but also maybe look at how we can improve things. That takes us seamlessly even to the next section there. I'll try my best. How do we fix this? Mark, I'll start with you on this. So we talked about changes in formations and everything. Just to chuck my 2 pence in before you jump in. I do think that there needs to be a bit of a change of formation. I don't think these players are working in this particular formation. The wingers are atrocious. I don't think Mickey Almiron could cross the street if the lollipop lady was holding his hand. He's just fucking terrible as a winger. Right foot, left foot, I don't know what he's doing. Fraser is just, he looks like the kind of player we signed, really, the player that was pretty much broken down at Bournemouth. There needs to be changes, even with the squad internally that you have, providing fitness levels return, Anderson, Maxi, Wilson. Do you think, from your opinion, a change of formation is something that you think would refresh the side, mate, and get us the points against Fulham?
It's tough, isn't it? Because I tend to think if you've got Maxi back, that makes a whole lot of the difference. If you've got Anderson back, it makes a whole lot of difference because they're the creative sparks. And although you created chances against Bournemouth, they weren't particularly great ones. So they will probably potentially would then come in and be the creative spot that would create better chances for those around them. I think if you play, and I think we touched on this before, came on, maybe playing 4-4-2, that you lose that little bit of something in the centre of the park, and especially if the opposition then, but it depends on how Fulham would line up then against you. So I'm not one to say let's, throw everything out and start with a new formation, because I think what Eddie Howe has done has worked very, very well. There were players missing. I think if you've got St. Maximin back, that's huge. I would suggest that you get a better performance than out of Miggy at times, because you've got a lot of the heat being taken by ASM. But I would seriously consider in that game playing Anderson if he's fit, because I think he just gives you a lot more consistent creativity. Rather, we talked about running into blind channels and then having to cut back constantly. And I don't think change for change's sake, like we said, it's not broken. It's been, like I said, one defeat in 7 isn't a bad thing. The wins haven't been there, but they'll come. The XG especially suggests that you'll start to take chances because you're scoring below the XG at the moment. So if that continues, the goals will come, the wins will come. It's go back to Ken's almost Dan Burns thing. Patience is kind of key for this, not throwing everything out and starting again just for the sake of it. If Eddie's plan is to continue as he has, but use the players that he can until you can bring in others to sort of play different styles or to take the place in the window in January. You've got to stick with what works, and it's worked so well so far. I don't see the need to completely throw it away and do something completely drastically different.
Yeah, well, coming on to you, Bob Fleming, if you haven't choked to death there in the bottom left-hand corner. Are you managing, mate? Are you coping?
Great reference, that, mate. Great reference.
Yeah, but you've got to be a certain age to appreciate that Bob Fleming. There's a few in the comments who'll pick up on that one, I'm sure. Ash in particular, I'm looking for you. But I suppose it's a good point Mark makes as well. But just bringing in this point about Bruno. Bruno loves a chat, doesn't he? Bless him. He loves to have a bit crack in the media, and he's good for a soundbite or two. So Bruno's mentioned that he prefers to play as a number 8. And going back to my kind of question then to Mark, say for you, Di, about tweaking the formation, do you think it's time to bring in, I mean, Shelby's injured, unfortunately, we've never missed him more probably than we do now, but do you think it's time to bring in somebody that can sit in that 6 role to allow Bruno to push on a little bit more, and then we'll get more out of him creatively? If Bruno's further up, he maybe wins that game for us at the weekend. Is that just too easy to say that, or is
I think so. I think so. It's too easy because there's two facets to that. One is, who is the 6 who comes in and plays there?
It's got to be Longstaff at the minute, hasn't it? It has to be.
So, and I'll tell you what, if he picks Longstaff instead of either Joe's, the fan base is in uproar, right? So, how's in a situation he's in a lose-lose if he does do that. Second of all, I agree with Mark in a sense that I wonder if we might be making changes for change's sake, because this is the plan. When ASM comes back in, let's say we go and win next week. ASN comes back in a new, do we change back the formation afterwards? What does that say about how? Ultimately, we've got to accept, and this is why I like the remember where we were last year line, because to me, it's not a reminder of how shit we were then and how good we are now. It's a demonstration of that. Again, I hate it, but that journey that we're going on.
Yeah.
If that's what we were then, look at what we are now. Imagine where we'll be in a year. Because in a year's time, we will have spent more money in January and another transfer window in the summer. There will be a plethora. The cough medicine's really kicking in now. A plethora. Oh, no, another squig. A plethora of improvements and new players, and then all of a sudden, are we going to be saying, "Oh, I want to go 2 up front and push Bruno for"? No, because we're going to have brought players in that will support Bruno in his preferred position. We'll have inverted wingers who can use both feet. We'll have a second striker whose hamstrings aren't made of chocolate. Like there's going to be options and progression that goes along with that. So I do think we need
That's a corker. I'll stop you dead in your tracks, mate. Yeah. Today's episode was brought to you by Cavani. Yeah.
That was very good.
That's a great reference for that. Yeah.
I think when it comes back to it, I know I hate being this person, but Howe knows what he's doing. I reckon he knows probably a bit more about football than the rest of us. So I'm happy to go.
Maybe
with
not as much as Mark. Mark knows
yeah,
quite
that's
a bit.
true.
I'm amazed he's not at the Snap Bomb conference. To be honest with you, he knows that much. He shouldn't even be here. To be honest.
I think to finish, I think it's important that we give the guy a bit of patience. I do think it might be worth 60 minutes into the game last week at 0-0 or 1-0, and maybe 60 minutes in on the weekend if it is still 0-0 or we're losing 1-0. Could we have gone to 2 up front just to mix it up a bit? I think we could have. I don't think that's a gamble that's not worth taking, given how deep Bournemouth were, for example. But if, for example, we'd done that, maybe they can expose us on the wings and they score a second on the break and everyone's going, why the fuck did he change to 2 up front? So there's always a flip side to that. So I do just think this is a bit of a teething problem. It's not no one's having a great time. There are definite things we can do. I think ultimately our biggest thing is when we play that deeper way against teams who are playing deeper. Isak has got to do more. Isak has got to do. I always talk sense, you bastard. I think we've got to do more to get Isak involved in the game in the way that suits him. I think it's easy to talk about wingers and da. But even if we had got the ball into the box, that's not his game. And you saw the last 10 minutes or so when we were kind of trying to put the ball into the box a bit more, he was actually coming out with the box and trying to link up play wide on the edge of the box, on both corners of the box. So he just wants to be more involved in the game. So that involves more movement. And I was watching, oh God, my mind's gone blank now. The cough medicine's really kicking in. But I was watching a game on Sunday, and the way that they were moving the ball side to side was so much quicker. That's how you get in behind teams who are sitting in. We're not with a long staff taking 4 touches and then playing the pass he could have played first time anyway. Yeah. That's how you do it. So, but again, that stuff comes with time. You can't just say, Isak's here now, lads. He's class. Play one-touch football. It was Arsenal. Yeah. Thank you very much, Audie. And that's the thing. So again, that takes time. So I do just think there's no fix required per se. I think a plan B would be the next building block, as I said at the start. But I think we've really just got to pump the brakes a bit and be a bit more patient as we go along. I'll shut up now, and my cough medicine's run out, so I'm just going to get another. You crack on,
that. There we go. Superb. Already getting your take on there. I don't know if you've had anything on the side there, mate, to help you get up to the high levels that Di's at, mate. But
I wish I had cough medicine.
I was just going to say, I might go get some of that myself. I'll tell you, I'll take on the world. But what's your take, mate? Do you think a change in formation? I know you're a huge fan of Isak. All this talk about shoving him out wide and playing him in a 3 with Maxi, you shake your head straight away. You're dead against it. I personally agree with you. I think we'd take his game away if we did that. Wilson's never going to play 25, 30 games a season, really. So how do we deal with that when Wilson's back? If Wilson's back for Fulham, how do we deal with that? What does that sign look like?
Yeah, Chris Waugh from The Athletic seems to have hinted, sorry to interrupt you, mate, that we're going to go 2 up top, or he's going to look at going 2 up top against Fulham. And that the plan was always to play Wilson and Isak together. My concern about playing Isak either wide on the right or wide on the left is that's what causes goals to drop off massively at Sociedad. Yes. I know people might get, a bit, he missed that chance against Palace and he looked a bit in effect. He's got 2 goals in 3 games, and one of those was at Anfield. And he was a hair's breadth away from putting us 2-0 up at Anfield, and that would be 3-3. The kid's a centre forward. Why would you put him wide on the right or wide on the left? Makes no sense to me.
No.
If it means we have to change formation, then maybe we have to change formation. And maybe if we're going to stick with the 3 in midfield, maybe that means Maxi plays the 10 and he floats. Because you know what? That's what he wants. He wants to be involved all the time, right or left through the middle. I'm not saying that's where I think he's at his best, but if that means that he doesn't have to do quite as much running backwards, maybe we might actually see a better performance from him across 90 minutes because he's only getting the ball and then carrying it forward. The danger with that, obviously, is that means there's very little protection out wide for Trippier and Target, unless you get Joe Linton and Willock to basically play holding, but off to the side massively. To come back to what you said about Bruno, I think we signed him as an 8. I think it just so happened that he played incredibly well as a 6/8/10 at the end of last season. I think we had to expect there would be a bit of a drop off because players don't come in and perform like that immediately and then maintain that, etc. And also, I think we have to say that we played him for 70 minutes on Saturday and it was perfectly evident he wasn't match fit. And I think probably he played because the other two weren't fit either. I think if one of Wilson or Maxi had been fit, maybe he wouldn't have risked him. But if Woff's to be believed, then Maxi won't make Fulham, which means that playing two up front probably becomes 4-4-2 and maybe Anderson comes in on the left and we have one of Fraser, Almiron, Murphy, Willock playing right side of midfield. It'd be interesting to see how that went because we've been working on 4-3-3 like Di says. That's always been the plan. It's always been the system. But do we have to ditch it because we need to score some goals?
Well,
I would say probably at some point we do.
Yeah, at the risk of sounding like Steve Bruce, my back five wouldn't be a Steve Bruce back five, but this whole talk about Burn and Botman and everything else. I mean, you could get away, I suppose, doing a bit of a 5-3-2 kind of a thing where you have the Trippier and Target as almost wing backs, and then you've got Botman, Burn, and Shaw, and you'll have the three Bruno and Joe Linton that can obviously be all action midfielders with Maxi in the free role in the 10. With Isak and Wilson, so it wouldn't be how's the big and defensive-minded back five. It would be two players to push on. But I know when we were in the chat group, I think someone made a point. Mark, just getting your take on this. Somebody didn't think Trippier had the legs to be that kind of a fullback. I mean, I would argue Trippier has a bit of the Beckhams about him. He doesn't need to beat a man; he can whip it round him. So I don't know whether that's maybe unfair to Trippier. Obviously, Matty Target, Matty Target really well as a player. You've watched for a long time. You're a big fan of him. Does Matty Target lack the attacking prowess to be that kind of fullback? Is he more of an old-fashioned left back, just over halfway line type thing?
He can certainly do both. Look, if you go back to the time that he spent playing in behind Grealish, especially, he spent an awful lot of time in the opposition half, and he linked up very, very well, overlapping that side. I think Trippier. I'm not sure it's a lack of legs in Trippier's issue. He spends, if you look at his heat map, he's always in the opposition half. He spends an awful lot of time getting up and down that flank anyway.
He's our most creative player at the minute. There's no doubt about that, Kieran Trippier.
Absolutely. I'm not sure I agree with the five at the back, although I kind of see the merit. It sort of, if you can maybe push one of the three centre backs into a sort of holding role that then drops into a three, that would starts to make a little bit of sense. Yeah, I would suggest so. Even Botman to that matter, because I think Botman is either one of those. They're so good on the ball that they can play almost that anchor in front of the back, the centre backs. But I think that playing the full backs, they'll do that anyway. If you get them in with the right person in front of them, they'll begin to overlap. They'll begin to support in that regard anyway. So that I think Target with certainly if ASM comes back, you've got the ability to be able to use the two of them. I think he probably worked very, very well down that left-hand side with Anderson as well, because Anderson's got the ability to kind of hold and then play the ball off to him as a player's overlapping. I think that would work really, really well for him too. But I think I go back to kind of Audie's point before about maybe he's playing one player as a 10, keep the three in midfield. I almost see that as probably the best option. Yeah. If you're not going to have the option of St. Maximin back, playing somebody in that 10 role is probably the better one, and you've got the two strikers that can maybe split a little bit wider at times in front of them, while not taking away their role as a centre forward. They can be a little bit more fluid. So I do think that's probably the best option while you don't have St. Maximin to play purely down the left.
Yeah. That's a fair show. Di, you want to come in about the back five, mate, don't you? Just before we kind of wrap up and finish up, mate. What's your take on back five? If I just give you nightmares, if you had to take more cough medicine because I said back five.
It does, mate. It's killing me. I'll just
take a sip, take a swig.
It's too much. Look, I just think that would be a huge step back, not in terms of the whether it would work or not. I think there's a chance it could, but I just think from what that represents to us and the manager and the previous manager and the players we've bought in, I think what that represents would be a terrible look. And I appreciate that's maybe not the point, but we're not there yet. People play 5 at the back because they're a bit uncertain about conceding goals. Wales play 5 at the back. It's because we've not really got anyone who can play as a holding role in midfield. That's why we do it. We need the extra security. Also, in that role, in that system, you need 2 out-and-out proper wing-backs. I think Trippier could do it. I don't think Targett can. And again, I think you've got to be young lads to be able to do that. People at the absolute peak of their career. Exactly. Yeah. And I don't think Trippier's there. And I still think you do a good job. I just think that creates as many problems as it solves. For me, as everyone has pointed out there, that the diamond is the way forward for me, because we would retain the 4 and the 3 at the back and then midfield, and just say to Maxi, you go and knock yourself out, kid. Because at the minute, like Audie said there, we're not worried about conceding. We're worried about scoring. Maxi's the one who's going to unlock the movement that could be around Isak. Would, if it's him holding things up, or Isak and Wilson kind of linking up together with St. Max kind of roaming around them, I think would be super, super effective. So that if we are going to go to 2 up front, that's got to be the way forward. I think 5 at the back, it just is a terrible look as much as anything else.
We should have signed Gareth Bale as a left wing back, mate. That's what we should have done on a free transfer.
I said that in the summer. No one listens to me.
We blame the Lynch man. He was the negative one about it. We should have got him in, mate. We should have got him in. So just finishing up the last couple of sections, we'll rattle through these ones, guys. So just coming to you on this one, Audie first. The international break is obviously sorely needed. A couple of the key players we've just been talking about there. Botman and see Di's ready for international. But Botman and Isak, obviously Botman from his own decision decided to pull out of the Dutch side and concentrate on trying to get fit and sharp, to get back in the Newcastle side. And then Isak seems to have a little bit of a niggle, mate. Do you want to just fill us in on those two? I know you were looking at it before.
Yeah, so Botman seems to have said that playing for the under-21s isn't his main concern at the moment, that he wants to make sure that he's actually getting himself back in the Newcastle team week by week. I think would be very hard-pressed as a club to say anything other than we appreciate him doing that. Obviously, I think if it was the Dutch national squad, I think that might be in a little bit more difficult position for him, but he was in the squad. I think it was, I might know better, but I think it was at the November 2020 squads, and then he hasn't been caught. He's been in the under-21 since. So he's obviously thinking, well, do you know what? I've tried under 21s before. I want to sort out my league form. The Isak one seems a bit more of a concern. He's been training away from the main group. Sweden training yesterday and today, I believe. That he's not been training with the main group. They've said he's got an unspecified concern. They're not being specific about it, but that's a little bit of a worry going forward, because it's no good getting Wilson and potentially Maxi back for maybe Brentford or whatever, and then not having Isak as well, because then it's back to what's your option? Well, if Wilson gets injured, it's back to being Chris Wood, which I'm sure Chris Wood would try his absolute heart out, but I'm sure the rest of us would probably want slightly more than occupying 3 defenders for 30 minutes.
I was going to say, mate, occupying defenders, yeah. Mark, just to get your take on this as well before we rattle off with the last subject, which will be positive, I promise, guys. For those who have stuck with us, I know we've moaned a bit, but we will end on a positive, I promise you. So just your take on that, Mark. Obviously, international duty, we don't have loads of the star players that are away. Obviously, Wilson's not in the England squad, Maxi's not in the French squad. Already just talked about Botman. Maybe Isak might get less game time than he probably would do. And that's only going to benefit us, surely, going into Fulham, Mark, isn't it? Having the key kind of 5 and 6 maybe ready to go.
I think absolutely. I think I touch on it, and as well, there was a comment earlier on. I'm just looking for it from from BT about potentially playing a match behind closed doors. I heard that as well. Yeah. And I think that the club have contacted a few clubs to try and get that done this week into next week. Burnley again. We're playing them about 19 times, haven't we? Yeah, but that again, that shows real sense in keeping match fitness around. If you haven't got players that are going to go and play international football as well, you need to keep up the sharpness in games. It's not just the training. You need to keep up that sort of fast-paced game mentality too. But keeping the players around where you can is brilliant for the club, because you can continue to build and work on all the things you want to take into the Fulham game without a huge chunk of them away playing for somebody else doing a different job. So I think that does work massively in favour. If you can bring in, if you can have a friendly or 2 behind closed doors, I think that's a really sensible thing to do.
Absolutely, I've got to come to die for the next comment that Audie's just put in there. I mean, I'm chuckling, but as a born Scot as well, I'm probably exactly in the same boat, to be honest with you. But it is the first time since 2007 that Newcastle United have got more than one player in the England squad. Obviously, I know you're really excited by that prospect. Being someone who really cares about how good England are, much like myself, is that's something to be proud of as a Newcastle fan, then, mate, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm fucking over the moon, mate. No, do you know what? I all jokes aside, he says, it is impressive that we have a strong international cohort.
Shows progress, doesn't it? Progress.
Exactly, it does. Yeah. I'll level with you. I couldn't give a shit that we've got 2 players in the England squad. I will only give a shit about that. I think it's November the 29th. Obviously, it's going to be tough for Scotland to worry. It's going to be tough for Scotland to worry about that, of course. But that'll be a good one in the World Cup. I'm off to Brussels tomorrow as well to watch Wales play Belgium. So looking forward to that, which is another reason I couldn't give really much of a shit about 2 players in the England squad. But there you go, good for them. Well done.
Well, exactly.
I'm curious, who are the 2?
Nick Pope and Trippier. Oh, 2007.
No, 2007.
Oh, will it not be Kieran Dyer?
Alan Smith. Alan Smith is one.
Was Kieran Dyer another one?
I think. Possibly. I'll come back to you. Give me a minute. I'll come back to you.
He'll come back.
Andy Carroll? After, no, sorry, that's too early for Carroll, isn't it? Sorry.
Scott Parker.
Scotty Parker, the Intertoto captain winning superstar of Scotty Parker himself. Superb, mate. Superb. Well, from one superstar of years gone by to another one. So we are going to end on a positive, another seamless link. So yeah, it has been a bit doomy gloomy in terms of poor results and us wanting that win. But some good bit of news that came out today was Elliot Anderson, the Geordie Maradona, as he's been affectionately nicknamed by the Bristol Rovers fans. One of my work colleagues is a Bristol Rovers fan. And he signed a new 4-year deal at the club. Just a quick round robin, lads. Start with you, Mark. Brilliant news this, mate, isn't it? The kid has come back. I said before, he went away a boy, he's come back a man, and really excited to see what this lad can do, mate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, short and sweet, he is the future, isn't he? I think we've had this comment several times. He's going to save you an absolute fortune on buying in a superstar because you've got one there. I think you can't rate the kid highly enough. He is local, he's a Whitley boy, isn't he? So he gets an even bigger tick in my box. So yeah, it's just you tie him down for as long as you possibly can now, and you build with him.
Absolutely. Already just getting your tape before that. Michael Owen, to coin a phrase, has said there, God, was he in the England squad, but he was here, apart from getting injured?
Possibly, he could be one of them.
Yeah, go watch our Michael Owen episode. You'll like that one, honestly. So yeah, just go back to more positive things. But Anderson, go on, hit me.
Yeah, sorry. The only thing I was going to say about Anderson is we've had a bit of a run of good quality youngsters going to other clubs. I think Bobby Clark went to Liverpool. Gibson, I think he was called the young centre half who went to Everton. We had a run of people who were highly touted and were getting England call ups at lots of levels and not to upset that again, but didn't get to go, didn't get the contracts kept on. When I was talking to people at the weekend, apparently Santiago Munoz, our Mexican superstar, is apparently going back to Mexico. Apparently it hasn't worked out. It's interesting that Anderson's the one that's been given that new contract because since Carroll, really, we haven't had an attacking player come through the academy where you've got really, really excited about it. And for Anderson to make that step up, there've been other players who've come through who've maybe made the odd appearance here and there. But for Anderson to be coming through and to be getting the game time that he is and how could we trust him in the Premier League the way he was, I think that's a really, really good sign. It does probably mean that those other people who are on the fringes who have been youngsters who've come through, your Matty Longstaffs as an example, it probably points towards their time being well and truly done. If Anderson's been given a new contract and getting the game time that he's getting compared to those lads. But I think it's a brilliant bit of news.
Absolutely. Di, this is the best comment of the night for me, mate. The Scotland debut is just around the corner for the young lad. I'm very excited to see that. And also, Jimmy has given you a bit of love there as well, mate. So Wales is a beautiful country. So Jimmy's your favourite viewer tonight, mate. I'm pretty sure of that.
Yeah, if it had spelt my name right, I would have liked him even more.
He's on the cough medicine, mate. That's what it is.
That's what it is.
The wrong keys.
Yeah, mate. Honestly, I'll echo what everyone said there. I've talked enough tonight, so I won't bore anyone anymore. But yeah, I'm in full agreement. He's someone with a good future ahead of him. I think he's a very strong prospect. Obviously, it'll be nice for us to talk about two Scottish players in Fraser and Anderson in the Scotland squad next time around. So that'll be something to look forward to, mate.
Absolutely, mate. That's a great way to end that, is, mate. Well said. The Welshman of the Scots were not bitter at all. Well said, mate. But yeah, it's really exciting to see what Anderson can do going forward. Hopefully, we'll see him start against Fulham, if Odie's right with that change of formation. So we're all wrapped up, guys. Thank you so much, everybody, in the comments. Always helps the episode flow. And as we said at the start, if you like what we do, click that like and subscribe button, help the channel grow. And we're really close to 1900 mark. Big milestone for us. So if you're new, smash the button, come and join us. And me and Mark will probably be back for What's Going On Monday, which is back. Obviously, we didn't do it this Monday for obvious reasons. So we're back this Monday. And then me and the lads, I'm sure, will be back next Wednesday forevermore. So let's keep supporting that team of McCoy United. Enjoy the international break, whatever you're doing. Di's going to have a belter. And we'll catch you next time. See you later.
See you guys.
It's all right.